Good evening all, and welcome. There are many strange creatures out there which we can't explain, which is what we're going to try and find out about tonight. So I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Let me take you back 5 months when the whole Storm Area 51 craze was happening. It was on the news and I was sitting there with my grandma. Unbothered, she looks at me and goes, "You know, aliens landed on our local beach in the 70s. They keep their ship hidden under the sand. That's why we haven't had a hurricane since." Now listen y'all, my grandma is very old school, conservative, religious, and doesn't even joke around. When she said this, I thought she was joking. But she went back to watching the news like she hadn't said anything. And for context, my aunt is one of my neighbors. Later, when I went to check my mail, I saw my aunt sitting on her lawn and went to tell her what Grandma said. Again, unbothered, my aunt goes, "Yeah, that's true. That's why part of the beach is sectioned off." I thought for sure this was some kind of elaborate prank. But later I saw another neighbor and told them the craziness, and they agreed. I looked it up and there were a bunch of news stories from the town claiming that the major reason storms won't hit my area, even though we're in a high-risk zone for hurricanes, is because of the aliens protecting their ship. To this day, I keep wondering what happened to come across my sister. It was wintertime here in the suburbs of North Virginia. I live with my family in a neighborhood not too far from Washington, D.C. So that's not to say we're in the middle of nowhere. Although our home is very close to a few decently large wooded parks. One night, I was at my then girlfriend's place up near the city. I got a phone call from my sister around 7, which in winter makes it pretty much nighttime here. I didn't think anything of it. Usually she calls me for random things she needs my insight on. I bet I'm up my sister. Ever since she was little, she loved horror movies. Growing up with her, I can tell you firsthand that she isn't easily scared and loves the paranormal. Alright, back to the call. I picked up the phone and first thing I realized was her voice was breaking up. She was sobbing and could barely talk clearly. Instantly, my mind started rushing with horrible thoughts about what could have happened. She kept trying to tell me to come home as soon as possible. I asked her why and if everything's okay, and she wouldn't say. She just kept asking me to come home. Obviously, I got in my car and rushed home. The neighborhood is very dim. There aren't many lights on, only the few solar panel garden lamps from surrounding homes. And as soon as I got home, I ran inside and asked her again what happened. And she finally began explaining. About half an hour before she called me, she went outside to grab a few things from her car again. It was dark out, but when the car is unlocked, the headlights turn on. When she opened the door to the car, the light was shining from the driveway onto the roof of the garage, and she noticed it from the inside of the car. A short, bipedal human-looking thing standing on 2 jet-black muscular legs. At first, she thought it was a raccoon, but this would have been obvious to her. But this thing, it scared her to the point of crying. While she was in the car, her view was obstructed from the rest of the creature, which was crouching, and from what she described, was scratching at something on the roof, trying to get in. Maybe. But she wasn't going to just stick around to find out. She got out of the car, pretending to not have spotted it. This thing, it acted in a seemingly intelligent way. She thought maybe if I act like I didn't see it, it would just stay up there and not try to attack me or anything. But as she walked behind the car, she heard it stand upright. Startled, she looked directly up at it. She gave me the following description. It was jet black, smooth, dolphin-like skin, with arms and legs, 5-digit hands and no claws, dead-looking, very dirty, and hair covering its head and body. The face is what was disturbing. The face had two shining yellow eyes that glowed from the car's headlights, no nose, just two slits, and a very wide mouth with no lips. She took off when she made eye contact, and as soon as she was indoors she called 911 and an officer was dispatched to our house. He looked around back to try and see if there was any damage or any sign of someone climbing on the roof, but there were no footprints nor damage. It was all in place. The officer just told us to lock the doors and windows and left. It's not like my sister to be terrified to the point of calling the police. Whatever this thing was though, I can only imagine what it was actually like to witness something like this in real life. To this day, both me and her get extremely uneasy, arriving home after dark, thinking that something might be waiting there for us. My mum, my sister-in-law and I are all lying on the ground watching the Perseids meteor shower. I see a plane in the sky, only its lights aren't blinking like they normally would on a plane. Hey guys, I think that might actually be a satellite. And since this is the age of technology and instant answers, my mum pulls out her smartphone, looks up a list of visible satellites passing over our location that night, and it turns out that plane is actually the International Space Station reflecting sunlight back at us, which is totally wicked cool, and there's supposed to be another satellite passing over in about an hour or something. So I'm like, hell yeah, let's find it. But not in so many words since, I'm talking to my mum. Anyway, we continue to watch the meteor shower for the next 15 minutes or whatever, and while keeping an eye out for this next satellite to make its sluggish way across the sky, it hasn't even been a half hour yet, when I swear I see another non-blinking plane-like object in the sky in the general direction of the magic satellite chart. So we're like, okay, maybe it's ahead of schedule, cool. And we're all standing up, walking around to get a better view, because, trees and whatnot. And all three of us are staring intently at this satellite, probably not even blinking, when it starts getting bigger. And the sudden realization hits us that it's not getting bigger, it's getting closer. Like, holy hell, it's gonna crash and we're all gonna die. I've never burnt those stupid notebooks from 7th grade. That's gonna be my only legacy. I'm about to ditch my family and book it the hell out of there. My sister-in-law, who is scared out of her mind of stuff like this and anything that's out of her control, is running in circles like in the cartoons. All the while my mum just starts standing there, chill as hell, when this thing changes its mind and turns the hell around and starts moving away from us and slowly starts to disappear. Minutes later, we saw the satellite we were originally looking for come in from one of the edges of the horizon and disappear over the other. I don't know what the hell that first thing was, but it didn't move fast and direct like a meteor, and it didn't blink or emit noises like a plane. My mum's convinced it was some kind of test flight of a military aircraft, since there's a military camp nearby, and I'm inclined to agree with her. But my sister-in-law swears she felt the air get hot as it moved closer. I did too, and I just chalk it up to adrenaline. Last night, my fiancé and I saw something so weird. We were driving to Charlotte from Florida. We passed by some town, I think it was York, and we were on the interstate. We noticed something that looked like 3 street lights, kind of in a triangle form. However, we didn't see the pole. It was in a construction zone, so I expected it to be just random construction stuff. We were driving for maybe 5 minutes and we never actually got closer to the lights. I was keeping a close eye on them because it had now caught my attention. A fast light came from the left of the sky that was kind of smaller, zooming across, and then a 90-degree angle swooped down right in front of the 3 lights. Then the furthest light, on the end, suddenly got 3 times its original size, and dissolved, aka got super small all of a sudden while zooming to the top and right of the sky. The two were still there, but then faded and zooped to the top left of the sky. I can't really understand what I saw, but I swear on my life I've never seen any plane go as fast as they went, and the angles that they zoomed at so sharply. My fiancé and I are hugely into camping. This particular season, where the incident happened, we discovered the perfect little hideaway clearing way out in the Crown Land, about an hour west/north of Cremona. We had made about 6 trips out there already, some with large groups of friends and some with just a couple of us, so we were starting to become quite familiar with the area we were exploring. This specific trip was a bigger one. We had about 10 people with us, one of whom is my lifelong best friend of 18 years. To add a little bit of context to this, my best friend and I strongly believe in extraterrestrials and paranormal events. So much so that we successfully signaled a UFO on a beach when we were 12. But that's a story for another time. My best friend and I, Kaylee, were talking about the UFO on the beach around the campfire with everyone. A choice few people were more interested than others. 5 of us decided it would be a really cool and super smart idea to try signaling something again. Before, we used a flashlight to create a specific pattern of flashes into the sky, so why not try again? I remembered the pattern, and after all, we grabbed a few flashlights, laid down near the beach, and began flashing lights into the sky. The first few minutes consisted of nothing but our half-inebriated giggles, but then Kaylee spoke up and asked if we were seeing what she was. We all focused hard on the sky, and lo and behold, there was a flickering light twice as prominent as the other stars, even Venus. I staggered in all directions for a few seconds, before setting on a steady trail over the tree line until we couldn't see it anymore. Thoroughly spooked, we jogged back to camp to tell everyone else what happened. Of course, most of them brushed it off as us acting like little drunks, but we all saw the exact same thing. Strange lights in the sky forgotten, we spent the next few hours around the fire with everyone. One of the more skeptical guys in the group went off to pee, but stopped right at the entrance to the clearing and said something along the lines of, what is that? Which caused the rest of us to see what he was looking at. Just a quick pause to set the scene. Our clearing that we camped in is smaller, only about 30 feet, set back into a tree line roughly 15 to 20 yards from the dirt road that runs through the Crown Land. Directly across the road from our spot is a small river backing out onto the thick forest and low mountains for miles. When we got to the entrance, we saw a massive, brilliant spotlight shining over the highest mountain peak across the road. It almost looked like the sunrise, except it was 1 a.m. and entirely in the wrong direction. Someone's immediate reaction was to say it was a truck, but that was quickly discounted, because we knew the roads and the trails around there, and they certainly didn't go up the mountain. Another theory was that it might have been a combine, since there are plenty of farms around the area. More likely, except this light was so big it looked like the source would have had to have been as big as a medium-sized yacht. As we were arguing about the possibilities, the light started to slowly beam across the mountaintop, like it was moving sideways. Definitely not a combine. The light would have had to have pointed in the direction it was moving instead of focusing on our direction the whole time, just slowly riding left and right. We all started staring at it in awe, at this weird light for about 10 more seconds, until it darted back across the ridge to its original position, all the while still shining towards us. It moved way too fast for a vehicle or farm equipment, and we no longer had any theories of what it was coming from. A very few short seconds after it stopped, it faded away so slowly you couldn't even tell it was dimming unless you looked away for a second or two. Eventually it disappeared completely. Thoroughly creeped out and chilled to the bone from the early September weather, we quickly made our way back to the fire. None of us can explain the light we saw that night, but it definitely left us all with a very uneasy feeling. I had nightmares the remaining 2 nights we were there, but there were no more unexplainable events after that. One time, I was out in the back with my uncle stargazing. I saw what looked like a shooting star, and I said, "Look." My uncle turned around and missed it, but we saw something else. It was a dark, dim, red, kind of ellipse-shaped object. It moved across the sky at a slightly faster than airplane speed, but slower than a shooting star. At this point, it looked to me like a floating ember. I expected it to fall. It went about halfway across the sky and stopped completely for a whole second, maybe 2, and then moved at a right angle to the right, twirled around a bit and shot across the sky to the left. It went really, really fast. As it reached the other side of the sky, my eyes began to lose focus. "I can't see it anymore," I said. My uncle, who had been following it with me all this time, pointed to it further down. I acknowledged it and pointed to it further up. It was doing a loop-de-loop and twists and turns all over that little part of the sky, and then faded away. I would have thought I imagined it had my uncle not been there. He was not just going along with me, because at times he pointed it out, and that's where I saw it. We have ruled out meteorite, shooting stars, planes and birds and such, because they don't come to a dead stop, don't turn so easily at an angle, don't fly erratically, and don't fly at that speed. It was a UFO. Alien or not, it was weird. Later that night, I heard what sounded like a plane flying low over my house, but it sounded unfamiliar, more high-pitched than a usual jet. I looked out and saw lights, but it was a row of red and green and white in a vertical line flying away from me ahead of my house. In my mind, it resembled an aircraft carrier at sea, but they don't fly, right? Especially not where I live. While I believe in life elsewhere, I don't believe they would pay us visits anytime soon. If anyone could offer any explanation, I would appreciate it. About 2 years ago, as a junior in college, I saw something that is quite inexplicable. It was a Friday night, and like most every other weekend, I was driving to my hometown, which was only about a 45-minute trip. It was around midnight when I began to see the general glow of lights from my city as I approached my hometown on the interstate. As I was looking at the glow of my town, 3 vibrant green lights appeared in the night sky, way out in the distance in front of me and well above the city. These 3 lights were equidistantly lined up on top of each other and were strangely vivid. All 3 lights zoomed from about the middle of my field of vision in the car, and then to the left before disappearing. It was only about 2 or 3 seconds, but the lights quite obviously covered quite a bit of distance in a very short amount of time. After seeing this short but quite amazing display, I burst out in a fit of obscenities. I've always been a skeptic towards UFOs or anything paranormal, and have never looked for anything of the sort. But there was no denying that I had seen something wholly mystifying that night that I will never forget. This wasn't a result of some kids shooting a laser pointer in the sky, and the visual display was certainly not from any nearby buildings. I'm completely positive that it wasn't any sort of commercial aircraft due to the fact of the time, and because I was living in rural Arkansas at the time. It's very hard to articulate exactly what I saw that night, and as a result, no one ever shares in my astonishment. It was certainly one of those things where you would have just had to have been there. Oh, and I was definitely not under the influence of any drugs. Figured I should just point that out. A number of years ago, I was coming home late at night. I was driving and minding my own business. I had just been seeing a friend. It couldn't have been past 11. And as I was making my way across the road, doing the 15-minute journey back home, do I notice something in the distance? Lights flickering in the sky. Bear in mind, this is the 1980s, and I understand it to be a plane and think nothing more of it. As I continue my journey through the winding countryside, do the lights start to become a bit brighter? I wonder if they're getting closer, which is slightly concerning, but I try to put it to the back of my mind as I'm nearly home. But within a very short amount of time, the lights shoot ever closer towards my direction, until I think they're gone, and finally, I look up and notice that they are above me. It's at this point I just about crap myself. I have no idea what's about to happen. I keep driving, unsure of what to do, and the lights are completely silent, flashing down on my vehicle. I try driving faster, but they noiselessly and effortlessly keep speed. I'm starting to get terrified. What is this? Who are they? What do they want? I drive home as quickly as I can, and just when I'm about to round the corner to pull into our driveway, the lights are gone. I pull up, exit my vehicle, and look out into the sky. I can't see anything. Was it all in my head? I try and hope that it is. I try and dismiss the whole event and forget it ever happened. When a few days later, I'm meeting up with my friend, and he looks at me and is rather pale. I ask him what's up, and he tells me in a confidential tone that something strange happened to him. He says he saw lights in the sky and that they chased him while he was driving. I look at him in incredulity and confess the same thing happened to me. I asked him what noise the thing made, and he said it was completely silent, and it was one of the scariest encounters of his life. Upon realizing we both had the same event, we kept it quiet. We didn't want people to think us crazy. We tried not to speak of it again, but it's always played on my mind, what we really saw and what was following us in our small town. When I was in high school, I had a dream one night where I was driving with my parents down an old back road in the middle of the night. A star fell from the sky and landed in an open field where I was overcome with a bright white light. Next thing I remember, I was on a cold, very hard metal table with two grey humanoid-looking creatures standing over me. Here's the thing I remember so vividly. I could see the reflection of the lights in their huge black eyes. The one on my right said something in these click sounds to the humanoid on my left, and they looked at each other. They were wearing white lab coats. I was in a huge white room, overhead lighting seeming to come from nowhere. An ear-splitting scream came from my right shoulder. When I turned and looked, there was a woman who looked like she'd just given birth, and blood was everywhere. I did not see the child she birthed. There was another humanoid creature in the way. For some reason or another, I don't know if I was told telepathically, or if it was just a sense of knowing and understanding, but I knew I was next to give birth. Keep in my mind I'm a 16-year-old virgin from high school. Never even kissed a boy, should not be pregnant in any way, shape or form. I then woke up. Nothing weird about my day. I go to school, but in my last period, I heard this girl telling her friend that last night she saw a star fall from the sky and explode in a white light. I just about crapped myself right there and then. I still have no explanation for what happened. Somewhere between June 27th, 1980 and April 23rd, 1981, I had a strange experience. This experience is the one that I have the most difficulty discussing with people. Part of the difficulty is that it was an experience that still frightens me when I think of it. The other part is the fear of people thinking I'm crazy. Of course, by sharing it with all of you, I am defeating that fear. We were living in Aberdeen, Maryland, on an army base. Not quite sure what a Marine was doing on an army base. We lived in military housing on the base. The house was a 2-story brick townhouse, and all of the houses on the base looked the same. I had a large bedroom and a king-size bed all to myself. On this night, I was sleeping. At the time, I slept with the light on, but dimmed because I was afraid of the dark. I woke up in the middle of the night and had an urge to play my kid-sized electric piano. I crawled out of bed and quietly walked to the piano across the room. I turned it on and sat back down on the bed while it warmed up. When I was certain that it was ready, I walked back to the piano and pushed the 2 lowest keys. I believe that Topher, my husband, told me a few weeks ago that these are usually A and B notes. The notes let out this low, depressive moan. I held the keys down for a while, not sure how long, and when I let go, I turned and looked at my closet. Standing there in my closet and reaching out for me were 4 beings. They had pale, slightish grey skin. They had large, black eyes. 2 slits made their nose, and non-existent ears and small mouths. They were all reaching out to me with their 4-digited hands. They wore black jumpsuits, and on the front of the jumpsuit was a metallic silver triangle logo, top pointed down, and emblazoned across the triangle was a blue metallic lightning bolt. They didn't move towards me. They just stood there at the door of the closet, reaching towards me. I ran towards the bed, hid my head under the covers and began to scream. Instantly, my mum and dad were there asking what was going on. I explained to them that the Coneheads were coming after me. I'm sure I had seen the Coneheads on Saturday Night Live at some point, and they were the only things that I remotely related to what I had seen, though they were nowhere close. I told them that I had played my piano, and then all of a sudden the Coneheads were reaching for me from my closet. Mum stayed in the bed to comfort me, while Dad walked over to the piano and pushed a key. Sure enough, the piano was on. As the key made the note, I told my dad to stop or they'd return. I don't know if I even went to sleep with my parents that night, or if I managed to fall back asleep after they spent some time with me, assuring me that there weren't Coneheads in the closet. The next morning, my dad took the piano outside and smashed it with a sledgehammer. In hindsight, I find that to be a rather odd reaction. It wasn't until years later, while I was in junior high, that I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, that I happened to see an illustration of what had appeared in my closet. These illustrations were from people who were abducted by aliens. My mum and sister were asleep when I was watching this show, and my dad was deployed in Kuwait for the Persian Gulf War. Upon seeing the images, I dropped to my knees and began shaking and crying. The images were exactly what I had seen, except most of the images of the Greys didn't have clothes on. Until finally there was one image, a drawing of a Grey wearing a black jumpsuit, and on the jumpsuit was the triangle insignia. No lightning bolt though. From time to time, I mentioned that night to my parents, and they have absolutely no recollection of me screaming my head off about the Coneheads. They do remember the destruction of my piano though. Was I abducted? I don't know. Why did they come to me? Did pushing the lowest note on my piano call them? Or was it just a coincidence? Will they come back? Originally, I would tell you that I hope the hell not. But maybe if they did, maybe I could get the answers that I have been looking for. When I was younger, around 7 or 8 years old. I used to sleep with my parents in their bed. Their bedroom had a computer room with a window looking out to the driveway and up the cul-de-sac. One night, it was just me and my dad sleeping in the bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and looked out the window and saw a car with its high beam lights on, pulling all the way into our driveway. I awoke my dad and told him someone was in the driveway. He went to check, as well as I, and there were no cars anywhere. He said I just dreamt it. I know I didn't, but I didn't bother making a fuss. We went back to sleep. The same night, I woke up and saw a car out on the street with its lights on, illuminating the street in front of it. I got up and looked out the window, and someone was standing there. A very tall man was standing in front of the car, motionless in front of the headlights. I was so confused. I looked out the window for a few minutes before getting back into bed. I had no idea why the man was standing out there, and I had no idea why the car's headlights were facing him. Now this is where it gets weird. I sometimes sleep alone, admittedly scared because my parents weren't there. For some reason I was able to sleep in that eerie room sometimes, but it always made me uncomfortable. One night, I had my first and only experience with sleep paralysis. Funnily enough, I woke up, noticed I couldn't move, and went back to sleep. There were no demons on top of me or anything I could see in the room, and when I fell back asleep I had a dream of a tall, thin, purple figure standing over me. It had very large human-like eyes that were staring at me. I knew it wasn't human. It stood there for a while, and I was confused and curious. The figure then leaned over my bed and dissipated into the bed at the end of my feet. To this day, I think it was a form of an extraterrestrial being. It had to have been correlated to the first previous event, the car pulling into the driveway, the strange man standing out on the street. As I'm writing this, I'm not entirely sure if it was a car illuminating the tall man, or if that car was actually a UFO pulling into the driveway, which beamed lights towards our house. What I do know is that I think a lot about it. Now, this story takes a turn. I'm diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, which can switch over into psychosis if I become too manic. I've suffered from a psychotic break 3.5 years ago and lost my mind, during which I thought I could speak to aliens, and I couldn't stop reading religious texts. One day I was in my basement, going through the psychosis, and could see pink, blue and yellow lights shining through my basement window. Now you might be thinking it was the sun reflecting through the window. It was a windy, cloudy day, and the sun kept peeking through the clouds, causing the visual perception of lights to flicker in the window. Right? Well, why were there colourful lights moving in swirls and showing geometric patterns? There was a thin piece of white cardboard covering the window, so I could see exactly where the lights were hitting. The cardboard was translucent enough to see these strange shapes shifting. I went to the window, took off the cardboard, and there was nothing. The lights had vanished, and all I could see were the clouds moving quickly due to how windy it was, and the sun peeking through repeatedly, causing a flickering effect. I'm well aware that I could have been hallucinating, but there is another part of the story that makes it even more interesting. For some strange reason, I was making videos of myself joking around and being somewhat childish. But it was disturbing because I was 18 at the time, and I rewatched one of the videos and heard a disoriented moan. I did not make that sound. It came as if someone had made a moan through the microphone. It sounded like it came from an electronic device. I later deleted the video after I came back to reality. The videos were so unimaginably cringy that I deleted the lot of them. Before the psychosis had begun, I went on a nighttime walk with my mother. As we turned a corner for about a second, I saw blue glowing light in the sky. It looked as big as the size of a dinner plate, that's how close it was. As I began to point to it, I turned to my mother asking her if she sees it. As my mother turned towards me and asked me what I was talking about, the UFO retreated into the night sky, like it only wanted me to see it. I told my mother what I saw, and she gave me a concerned look. I laughed at excitement, because my dad had recently told me about a UFO he saw when he was younger. After that experience, I went psychotic. These events I experienced as a child, and the UFO encounters I had are 100% real to me. I believe in aliens, and I believe I was contacted. I'm 21 now and haven't seen anything since. I'm properly medicated and attend therapy now. I'm more stable than I've ever been. If any aliens are hearing this, I hope you guys weren't the ones that gave me this mental illness. Before I was born, my mum would dream about aliens. More specifically, she would usually dream about the spaceships. After I was born, my mum started to dream that the aliens wanted to take me. She would always be upset in the dream, but apparently the people around her would tell her it's okay, she has to go. Fast forward a few years and I'm around 12. My mum wakes up in the middle of the night, feeling like she can't go back to sleep. She goes to the window and stares out of it. I wasn't there, so I can't corroborate this, but she says she saw a light in the sky zip from side to side, making no noise. Then it hovered over the house across the street for a while. Supposedly, it was there long enough for her to wake up my stepdad so he could come and look. He admitted seeing it at the time, but didn't want to talk about it later. He was very no-nonsense, very skeptical. Anyway, it eventually shot up and out of sight. Maybe this is nothing, who knows? So then a few years later, I have the first alien-related dream that I can vividly remember. I was at my grandpa's house in this clearing, staring up at the night sky, waiting for something. Then the sky turns purple, and a massive spaceship comes over the clearing. It's all black, with light coming from windows around the sides of it. I run to my car and the dream ends. Maybe a year after that, I wake up and there were 2 perfectly cut triangles in my sheets. These were brand new flannel sheets I had been given at Christmas. I still keep that sheet because it freaks me out. Maybe there was a flaw in the fabric from the beginning and it just ripped. It felt odd though, especially when I learned that many people report triangular body marks after an abduction. Then the strangest dream happens. I was about 19 or 20 years old. I was walking downtown when all of a sudden I was lifted into the air and my body starts to vibrate violently, kind of like a cartoon character when they get electrocuted. I flew through the air like this for a while, and then I was dropped off back at my porch. I was yelling but no sound came out, and then I looked down at my hand and there was a piece of metal and some wires sticking out. So I ripped it out of my hand and the dream ended. Although there was no specific alien contact in the dreams, I woke up thinking, my goodness, aliens. It felt so real. It was as if I was conscious through the dream. The last odd occurrence was 3 years ago. My mum started dating a guy, and they were talking, and one night he said, I think I know what one of your fears is. And my mum was like, okay. And he said, you're afraid your daughter will be abducted by aliens. So my mum is obviously shaken, and he says to not be afraid, that they always bring her back, don't they? My mum, still to this day, has not shared the whole conversation with me. What I am about to share is something that occurred to me when I was young, around 7. I'm 21 now, and I still have no idea what I saw. Me and my mum stayed in my uncle's house when we went to Mexico, and during the daytime, it was nothing close to scary. The room we stayed in had a window that covered the entire back wall, so when we opened the curtains we had a clear view of the road and the woods behind the house. It was around 10 p.m. when I was in bed ready to go to sleep. Suddenly I had the urge to look out the window. I looked up and back out the window because obviously I was laying down, so my head was tilted. I saw 5 lights, all different colors, circling the neighbor's house and the woods behind us. In Mexico, there are what my mum called witches or lechuzas, but I don't think that's what they were. I also don't think it was aliens or a UFO. They all had their own motion and speed, they weren't synchronized. I woke up my mum and she saw them as well. She told me to go close the curtains and ignore it. Well, when she was asleep, I decided to get up and open the door, which was on the opposite side of the window facing the front of the house. As soon as I opened it, I saw another light. It was right in front of me. It was not close, but it was straight ahead and appeared to be hovering only a few feet above the ground. It was glowing a yellowish orange. I closed the door, of course, scared as hell, and I stared at it from behind the door. I stayed there for a solid 5 minutes, and then the light slowly dimmed out. I have no clue what I experienced that night. Has anyone else gone through something similar? What was it that I saw? Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. I think it's been about 8 months since we've tackled the subject of UFOs, so I thought it was about time to revisit them again. Certainly a strange topic. It's bizarre that so many people, independent witnesses, report very similar things. Could it be because they're publicized so often in different places and people just spit out the same stories? Or could it be that they really happened? I leave that judgment down to you. As always, a huge thank you to my lovely patrons. If you would like to have your name on screen, feel free to check out my Patreon. It certainly would mean a lot to me. It's a fun place. You get special access to some unique things, so if you're interested in that, check it out and be sure to let me know. In any case, if there's a story of something that has happened to you that you would like to share and potentially have narrated in a future episode, feel free to send it to me via email or Reddit. By doing that, I might put it in a video. Just please be sure to put in plenty of punctuation, grammar, and paragraphing and stuff. Thanks, guys. Alright then, but for now it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, beware of aliens, and I'll see you in the next one.